Hello student, I am Dr. Smita M. Patil, Associate Professor with School of Gender and Development Studies, IGNOU. Today I am going to give a lecture on patriarchy and violence in the contemporary India. This is part of the BGS 012, a course titled Gender-Based Violence. So the category of patriarchy is central to the perspectives and practices of the social and political struggle of the women and marginalized sexual minorities. The main aim of this lecture is to attempt or to explore the various dimensions of the category of the patriarchy. It will provide the definitional understanding of the term patriarchy. It also discusses about liberal, socialist, Marxist, radical feminist understanding of patriarchy. Patriarchy and consequent violences are also discussed to demonstrate the nature of the patriarchy and also the contemporary context, the ways in which patriarchy is operating. So let us understand how we define patriarchy. The term patriarchy has been undergoing multiple interpretation. So it's not a stagnant category then. So interdisciplinary approaches grounded in humanities and social sciences have widened the scope of such debates. It is the social organization that possesses predominant power. It also refers to the existence and operationalization of the power via community. Therefore, the member of the families in that community have to live under the authority of the head of the family or the patriarch. It is the rule of the father. This term was used initially to describe the societal system with the male heads. Feminists have used this term to refer to the male domination. There are ideological differences in the feminist ideologies related to the category of patriarchy. Hence, they have a diverse interpretation on patriarchy. Patriarchal domination is central to all spheres of the society and polity. It is pertinent to the diverse realms of human life. It is also analyzed as a government, a family, society under the guidance of the father. The category of patriarchy is used to refer to the fathers or the head. Then it is deployed to the horrific designation of the head of the religious institution also. Some feminist scholars have argued that patriarchy questions the fixed nature of the sexual identity. Rule of the father or the patriarch led to the subjugation of the woman. Families and various forms of the societies had to function according to the patriarchy. It is noted that the term patriarchy was applied to demonstrate the male domination till 1960s. Now the term patriarchy has the stigma attached to it. The term patriarchy has become antithetical to the spirit of the modern civilized social and political relations. Patriarchy leads to the oppression of the women and children. Paradoxically, modern industrial societies were patriarchal in nature. In other words, patriarchy lurks in the backdrop of the post-modern society and its scientific technological transformation. Debates based on race, class, caste have challenged the universal construction of the patriarchy. Now, we will, try to understand the liberal feminist understanding on patriarchy. Liberal feminism departed from its predecessors of the feminists through its distinct position. It is analyzed that the liberal feminism come into picture with the development of capitalism. Alison Jagger discusses about the ideological nature of the liberal feminism. Liberals argue for democracy and political liberties. Voices of the liberal feminists are analyzed as, and I am quoting from Alison Jagger's work, unheard throughout the 300-year history of the liberal political theory, unquote. There is an epistemological exclusion of such feminism in the context of liberal political theory. Liberal feminists argued that principle of liberalism should be applied in the context of the woman as well as the natural rights of men and women in the 18th century. They argued for the utilitarian position that support equal rights for women under the law. Liberal feminists asserted that states should introduce different social reforms for equal treatment of the woman in the backdrop of the liberal theory of the welfare state. Liberal feminists questioned the dominant liberal premises and provided different understanding of the human nature. They argued that women should have the same political and legal rights due to their status as a rational being. Liberal feminists argued for the right to education, political participation, employment, complete equality before the law. Liberal feminism emphasizes on the rights in the public sphere. They do not examine the power equation that are central to the public. Liberal feminists consider state political institution as neutral in its approaches. Conventional main world is positioned about the woman in an uncritical fashion. It is further argued that liberal feminism gained its strength through engaging with the plural strengths within the field of liberalism. It is also argued that the separation of the woman can be addressed through political landscape within the realm of the democracy, that both men and women can engage with the democracy. Thus, it challenged to the patriarchal political perception related to the woman to an extent. It is critical that such streams of feminism is not against the status quo. In other words, it is incapable to bring radical change related to the life worlds of the woman. Liberal understanding of the private and public is also questioned by the feminist scholars from the other school of thought like the radical feminism. Now, let us get into socialist feminist perspective on patriarchy. Socialism is much discussed in the history of the global political thought. According to Valerie Bryson, socialism addressed the issues related to the mitigation of the poverty. It also addressed about the different issues faced by working classes. It believed in a piecemeal reform than the Marxian ideal of the revolution. It shared the affinities with the feminism that explored social justice. It provided more focus to social justice than patriarchy. However, working class socialist and suffrage campaigner Hannah Mitchell exposed the patriarchy of the socialist men activists as equal to that of their patriarchal political opponent conservatives. There were conflicts related to the voting rights of the women and the political parties. Socialist feminist in its early days in America was based on abolitionist tendencies. It initiated anti-prostitution campaign that was influenced by Edward Bellamy's book, Looking Backward. Some among the socialist feminists emphasized on the idea of the moral superiority of the woman. They also found women as a regenerator and reformer of the corrupt society. In other words, those women who are part of such morality, corrupted societal order should be reformed and so on. It is observed that some scholars use the term socialist feminist to denote those feminists who do not completely depend on Marxist theories. For example, utopian socialist turned supporter of the women's suffrage, Gilman, belongs to that stream of the feminism. Gilman argued that socialist feminism has created its own path in the history of feminism. She emphasized that economic dependence and scientific care for the young children is as important than the ballot. According to Bryson, Gilman introduced a perspective that centered around the woman and connected female values with that of the human progress and socialism. She believed in a gradual evolutionary changes rather than the Marxian restructuring of the political institution and revolutions. Gilman critiqued the oppressive nature of the marriage and its impact on women. She critiqued the degrading and exploitative nature of the family and consequent psychological issues of the women. Socialist feminism is critic for its focus on advanced industrial societies and inherent racism that avoids the question of racial discrimination family of the Afro-Americans. Let us also try to understand the feminist framework, Marxist feminist framework, or the engagement on the patriarchy. According to Bryson, Marxist feminism is grounded on the premises that looks at the oppression of the woman and its relation to the socio-economic context. Marxism emphasizes on historical role of the collective class struggle. At the same time, there are criticism to Marxism that argue that Marxism reduces everything to the class. Therefore, the works of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, Augusta Bebel, Clara Zetkin, etc. are criticized for the economic reductionism. In other words, such perspectives sought economic basis of all social phenomena. Feminist scholars analyze the contribution of Alexandra Kollontai for her rigorous understanding of Marxism. It is observed that the communist societies after 1920s could not look beyond the traditional Russian official Marxist position that relates woman question to the capitalism. At the same time, communist and post-communist Russia witnessed various problems related to the lives of the woman. It is observed that classic Marxist position emphasizes on economic autonomy and complete participation of the woman as essential for liberation of the woman. Marxists faced the radical feminist criticism about the sexist and patriarchal approaches of the Marxism. On the other hand, Marxists explained that such foregroundings of the woman's oppression as a divisive bourgeois deviance that distracts the solidarity and caste struggle of the working classes. Scholars such as Catherine McKinnon demonstrate the contradiction between the feminist framework that analyzed the sexual exploitation with that of the Marxist framework on power. She also linked it with the feminism's emphasis on lived experiences and Marx emphasis on the concrete practices. However, Nancy Hudstock argued that feminists have reinterpreted the Marxist approach through integrating theory based on experience, personal and political changes. In response to the Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels' argument that position, production and reproduction as a part of material basis of the society, Bryson explored the theoretical possibilities related to the confrontation between men, women, economic relation. Debates extended to the domestic labor or the notion of woman as a reserve army of labor. According to Lisa Vogel, work of the woman in the home was assessed to achieve the socialist change. Housework and the labor outside the home in the backdrop of the capitalism and the resistance against the capitalism are a part of domestic labor debate. In addition to the work and patriarchy at home, women are also part of the larger exploitative economic order. As mentioned earlier, debates on Marxist feminism also discuss about the Marxist idea of reserve army of labor. This is essential for the operation of the capitalist economy. The stigma related to the labor and skill of the woman and patriarchal positioning of the men in the context of the work and the labor are contested in the debates of Marxism and feminism. Michel Barrett, a scholar who is influenced by the writing of French Marxist scholar Louis Althusser, discuss about the role of pre-existing gender ideology and capitalism in the case of operation of women. Hartiman argued that capitalism and patriarchy as central to the modern society. Anna Ferguson observed that semi-autonomous system of the patriarchy, persistent patriarchy has a history that cannot be reduced by the economic change. Iris Maria Young analyzed that patriarchy is grounded on women and labor and very much part of the production process. And I must tell you that Iris Maria Young's work, you must read it. On the other hand, Alison Jagger also discusses about the interlinkages between patriarchy and capitalism. Lisa Vogel analyzed that the women from the working classes have to endure sex-related operation and it can be understood through Marxist understanding. Vogel observes that working class women are thus oppressed by capitalism. Bryson also discusses about some Marxist feminists who also engage with the question of private and non-political in addition to economic understanding. For example, Judith Michel argued that feminism should analyze the family-grounded structure of the reproduction, sexuality and socialization of the children in addition to the conventional Marxist understanding of structure of production. The terms such as Marxist feminism and socialist feminism are interchangeably used across disciplines. Socialist feminists address the issue of sexism in left-wing parties and trade union, class, race, community, environmental question and so on. Well, while discussing the role of Marxist feminism, one has to return to their critical reading on the category of division of labor. It is observed that the category of the division of labor made an important entry in the academic circle in 1970s. Feminists deployed Marxist perspective to expand their understanding on nuances of labor. It is analyzed that the work of the woman in the home is never acknowledged as unpaid work or labor. It is not considered as a reproductive nature. On the other hand, labor of the waged man is considered as a productive for the family and community. It is observed that domestic labor contribute to the capitalism. Neoliberal phase of the capitalism and its impact on the changing nature of patriarchy raises significant challenges to the Marxist feminism even in the current context, and it will always raise the question. Now let us understand the radical feminist inquiry of the patriarchy. Radical feminists departed from the other feminist approaches due to its distinct theoretical proposition and strategies. According to Bryson, there are diverse arguments exist in the rubric of radical feminism. Radical feminist theory is based on the experiences of women and perception and argues that it is not necessary to comply with dominant patriarchal framework and interests. Radical feminists consider the operation of women as a rudimentary and universal in nature. It further notes that the interests of the woman are opposed to that of man. These interests link them to the sisterhood that is beyond class, race, etc. They argued for the collective struggle of the woman to end their oppression under the patriarchal order. One of the central features of the radical feminism is that it has demonstrated how male power is able to impact the public realm of the politics as well as the private arena of the paid employment. The instructions of both natures are mediating patriarchal feminism. Radical feminism were able to force solidarities with marginalized groups, including Afro-Americans. The political nature of the personal become the central to their struggle through the much celebrated motto, the personal is political. You know, this is a famous slogan in the second wave feminism. So, scholars such as Kate Millett explain the nature of conditioning in the inherent in the patriarchy. It leads to the internal colonization of the woman. Patriarchy is also studied as one of the thrives on the economic exploitation and coercive force. Radical feminists also condemn patriarchy that includes sexual violence and rape. Radical feminism is criticized on a different ground. The theoretical nature of the radical feminism is descriptive and not analytical. The vote is able to analyze the origin of the male power. Thus, it fails to end the oppression of the woman based on patriarchy. It creates some false impression about men as an enemy and suggests counter heterosexual practices. Radical feminist theory is also criticized as a historical one that creates false universalism and neutralizes the conflict and differences within the life worlds of diverse section of the woman. It also reproduces the image of the woman as a victim and thus denies their agency. In other words, it is not able to see woman as a change maker. Radical feminists emphasize on specificity of the patriarchy and argued that it should not be reduced to economic power. They also exhort women to fight against the power of the man that suppresses the interest of the woman. It is further argued that male power is constructed and it is central to the biological male. Radical feminists also read the state political institution as an oppressive manifestation of the patriarchal power. Their understanding of the state is different than that of the liberal feminists who read state as a neutral institution that excludes women. Liberal feminists also think state can be positive in the case of social and political mobility of women. State for radical feminists exclude women through their patriarchal institution. State power is a patriarchal power for the radical feminists. Some of the strengths in the radical feminists like Christine Dolpe analyze unpaid housework of the woman. Radical feminists consider exploitation of women more sexual than that of the domestic exploitation that happened inside the family. They argue that patriarchy is based on the male violence. They asserted that patriarchy is also based on the control of the sexuality of women. There are radical feminist critics to the reproduction. For instance, Sulimit Firestones argue that role of the woman as a reproducer that has subjected them to the patriarchal power. Therefore, she spoke against the childbearing role of the woman. Radical feminists condemn the heterosexual conjugality as a form of rape. Radical feminists such as Andrew Dawkins also fought against the sexist, violent culture of the pornography. Pornography is analyzed as a patriarchal form of the power that distort the sexuality. So radical feminists critique the socialist Marxist feminist approach to the woman's question as a sexist, patriarchal in nature. Radical feminists argued that political institutions are articulation of the patriarchy. For instance, Sylvie F. Edrisi discusses how inferiority of the woman housework patriarchy function in the backdrop of the capitalism. Radical feminists analyze the power inherent in the patriarchy. Now, let's understand the relation between patriarchy and violence. Fear was central to the Victorian attitude related to the morality. It was linked to the fear associated with the male violence toward women, child prostitution and related sexuality-oriented diseases. Some of the earlier writings that discusses the issue of the woman discuss about the prevalence of the male violence and impact on the working class woman. Feminist scholars across the globe have discussed about the legal solution to the women who undergo marital violence. Radical feminists analyze patriarchy inherent in the violence of men and their regulation of the sexuality of the women. The question of the marital rape is contested across the globe. Violence against women start from the hatred of the woman. Rape and various forms of violence against women demonstrate the mysterious growth of the patriarchy. Capitalism reproduces various forms of the violence that also intersect with the violence against women. Scholars have analyzed the connection between patriarchy, sexuality and violence. There are different interpretations related to the sexuality. Sexuality is analyzed and oppressive in nature. Sexuality is also read in relation to the male violence. For instance, Valerie Bryson also analyzed how violence is integral to the institution of the marriage irrespective of the class, location of the couple. Social stratification and its ideology also determine the patriarchy. Now, in the Indian context, we need to also understand caste and patriarchy. Caste operates through endogamy and patriarchy, as Ambedkar said. Marriage outside the caste is controlled by the patriarchal power inherent in the ideology and practice of the caste in India. Caste-based patriarchy thus unleashes violence over those women who are at the lower strata of the caste system. For instance, violence against Dalit women is rampant across the different states in India. Caste, custom, modern law, conflict strengthen the ways. It further accelerates the violence against women. Honor killing also signifies the violence determined by the caste and patriarchy. I mean, this again, honor killing is a very contested category, the concept. We need to tease out and understand this. So, lawyers have deployed the honor killing, have not been stopped even after the annihilation of caste, after 75 years of the India's independence. Dalit women are oppressed by the patriarchy inside the community and outside the community. Non-Dalit communities and caste. Dalit women have challenged the external outside community and internal patriarchy within the community as well. Atrocities against the Dalit women also show the various dimensions of the caste and patriarchy. Caste, gender and patriarchy affects the women's representation in labor force also. In addition to the caste, the other religions also perpetuate patriarchy in a different way. Religions are considered as essential in the social bonding. At the same time, religion also criticizes on the basis of vicious ideology and practices. It also leads to the politicization of religion. Thus, it leads to the ideology and hate-ridden practices of the communalism. Religion also employs women, patriarchal ideology, women conditioned by the religion. Therefore, they also are the victims of the religion-based patriarchy and consequential communal violence. So, custom and personal laws are the part of the religion, and one would see that the political mobility of the woman, how one has to reflect upon that. Thus, they are forced to live according to the religious patriarchy. Women from the different religions and marginal religions equally have to bear the brunt of the religion. There is a changing nature of the patriarchy which we need to understand. Patriarchy acquires diverse shapes and practices according to the global social, political, economic context. According to John Lee, there is a shift from the agrarian capitalism to the patriarchal capitalism. Patriarchal based operation coexist within the division of labor, within household and also with the industrialized species. The term patriarchal belt refers to the regions also with common societal characteristics. And one has to sort of engage with this debate in order to understand, and across the world it goes on. So therefore, it has analyzed the classic patriarchal coexistence across the religions like Confucianism, Islam and so on. Women's status in the marginalized and the patriarchal belt also one has to sort of engage with that. And the new liberalism is shaping the gender relation through new patriarchy, and the fight of the woman should be against the new liberal, new patriarchal framework. Patriarchy is regaining a new avatars according to changing political scenario and economic ideology, and changing conceptualization of gender and masculinity are skeptical of the use of the category of patriarchy. If we look at Butler's work, Butler observed the theoretical imperialism in universalizing the patriarchy in the writings of Catherine MacKinnon. However, patriarchy is being challenged through the entry of the woman and other genders in the different sectors of the societal and political orders. People are also conditioned through the patriarchal ideology that is there, and for instance the media, information communication technology, and one has to then understand also the debate on the social media. Social media is also becoming the agent of the patriarchy. The wide range of internet is manipulated by the misogynistic and patriarchal male users to spread their malicious against women through diverse online platform, and it's now increasing also among all genders, not only the woman. So communicative capitalism is thriving in the age of capitalism and information and communication technology, as Jody Dean offers this term to us, communicative capitalism. The free and democratic space of social media is being challenged through the development of patriarchy within the social media platform. Tweets have reinforced the patriarchy and gender relation in the context of social media platforms such as Twitter. Previously we used to call it. So one has to also see in all social media platform how patriarchy is operating and thriving. In addition to this surveillance on the woman in the social media, censorship, surveillance of the conservative opposite gender men often contribute the various forms of the patriarchy. Online offline lives of the woman are being perpetrated, and the conservative misogynistic online offline patriarchies. So women across the globe are mistreated for their freedom of expression in social media. Online hate speeches, hate becomes the mediator of the patriarchy as well. Feminist is being reread in the context of the diverse social media platforms. Women across different platforms are deploying the social media to assert their political interests and aspiration. So question of gender justice is being shown in the time of the various form of the gender discrimination and sexual harassment. One of the important contradictions that have raised the context of the online feminist assertion is that the feminist articulation in the social media lacks critical reflection due to the spontaneous and larger space of the social media. Political assertion of the woman are gaining its momentum irrespective of the patriarchal nature of the online platform. So let me conclude this lecture that in this lecture we engage with the various debates on the category of patriarchy. It analyzed the term patriarchy through theoretical and empirical insight based on the women's gender studies and related social sciences stream. It provides nuanced understanding of the term patriarchy in the backdrop of the liberal, socialist, Marxist, radical feminist movements and their ideology. It also probes the changing nature of the patriarchy and its persistence through caste, religion, gender. It also revisits the debate on the patriarchy in the context of the social media. Thank you.